In a village on the edge of the savannah, the finest hunter anyone had ever known nearly died in silence, rather than call out for help. Let me tell you what happened to him, and why his story still finds its way into homes today. His name was Okonkwo. By the time he was 30, he could track a gazelle for 2 full days without losing its scent, could read a broken blade of grass and know exactly which direction danger had come from. Children whispered his name whenever courage was mentioned. Men measured themselves against him, and after so many years, even Okonkwo had begun believing he was only valuable when he looked unbreakable. Then came the dry season that broke everything. The rains didn't come, the rivers thinned to cracked mud, cattle grew thin, and one afternoon, deep in the bush, far past where anyone would think to look for him, Okonkwo's leg caught in a hidden root as he chased a wounded antelope and snapped clean below the knee. He lay there as the sun crawled across the sky. He could hear his own breath, ragged against the silence of the bush. Other hunters were within a half-day's walk. He could have called out, but something in him refused. He had spent his whole life being the one others leaned on, and the thought of being carried home, weak and broken, on a stretcher like a child, felt heavier to him than the shattered bone in his leg. So he dragged himself, inch by inch through thorn brush that tore his skin, across a dry riverbed that scraped his palms raw. The first night he slept beside fresh hyena tracks, too exhausted to feel afraid. By the second morning he could no longer stand at all, and still every yard forward had to be earned with bleeding hands. His water ran out that same night, and still. He said nothing to the darkness around him. It was a child who found him, a girl no older than 9, gathering firewood far from where children usually wandered. She didn't ask if he was all right. She didn't wait for him to ask for help, the way he had waited 2 days for himself to be strong enough not to need it. Without a word, she dropped every stick of firewood she had spent the morning gathering, and ran. She returned with 4 men from the village carrying a woven stretcher between them. As they lifted him from the dirt, Okonkwo wept, not from the pain, but from something older, something that had been sitting in his chest for years without a name. He tried to explain, to apologize, to tell them why he'd waited so long to be found. The oldest man carrying him only smiled. "Did you think," he said, "that we built this village so you could suffer alone inside it?" Okonkwo had no answer. He had never once considered that the village was for that too. It took him 3 months to walk again. In that time, the village fed his family, mended his roof, tended his fields quietly without being asked twice. Not because he had finally requested it, but because that was simply what the village had always been for. He came to understand something he had spent 30 years refusing to see, that his worth to his people had never been the strength in his legs or the silence in his suffering. It was, in the end, his willingness to be carried. He hunted for many more years after that day, but he was never again the man who mistook silence for strength. He became known instead for something quieter, for being the first to ask a struggling neighbor, "What do you need?" and the first to answer honestly when someone finally asked him the same. Here is the truth that story has carried across every generation that has told it since. Strength was never about carrying everything alone. It was always about knowing who to hand it to. So think for a moment about what you are dragging through your own dry season right now. Maybe it's the burden you've smiled through all week. Maybe it's the conversation you've rehearsed 100 times but never had. Somewhere, there is a version of that village waiting for you to call out. A friend, a family member, a therapist. Someone whose entire role in your life is to help carry what you were never meant to carry alone. The waiting doesn't make you strong. It only makes the walk home longer. So if there is one thing to carry from Okonkwo's story into your week, let it be this: you were never meant to make it home by yourself. If this story found you at the right moment, don't just scroll past it. Someone in your life needs to hear it too. Share it with them. And if you want more stories like this, one truth, one shift in perspective, from every corner of the world, subscribe and stay a while.